I was standing alone in my kitchen in Queen and watching the morning mist slide slowly across the skyline. The Space Needle looked like it was being swallowed inch by inch, disappearing into gray silence. My coffee sat untouched in my hands, cold, bitter, forgotten. Kind of like me. It was exactly 6 in the morning. The hour I usually enjoyed the quiet. The hour when the house and I agreed not to ask each other too many questions. But that morning, the silence felt heavier. Like it had weight. Like it was pressing into my chest until my breath came shallow and uneven. Before I go any further, let me ask you something. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. Alright, thank you. Let me continue. The radiator hissed in the corner, the same tired sound it had made every winter since my husband passed. It had become my companion after I retired from the library. 40 years among books, whispers, and borrowed stories, and somehow no one prepares you for the moment your own story goes quiet. That's when I noticed my phone. It was glowing on the counter, like it was accusing me of something. Evan. My son's name stared back at me. I watched it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. My fingers trembled before I even realized I was scared. And I hated myself for that. What kind of mother shakes when her only child calls? Hello. I finally said. My voice sounded thin, fragile, like old paper. Hey, Mom, Evan replied. There was noise behind him. Soft clinking. Expensive. Polished. Jazz playing somewhere far away. The kind of background sound that doesn't come from kitchens like mine. It sounded like money, like belonging, like a world I had never been invited into. I wanted you to hear it from me first, he said quickly. Too quickly. We got married yesterday. Yesterday. The word hit my stomach so hard I had to sit down. Married. I looked at the small calendar on my wall. The date I had circled months ago, the one he told me was still being planned. I had bought a dress for that date. Navy blue. Simple. Safe. Hanging in my closet like it was waiting for permission to exist. You got married? I whispered. Yes. Yesterday, he said again, clearing his throat. We decided to keep it very intimate. Ah. Here it came. The Harringtons had a very specific vision, he continued. They wanted everything to flow. A certain atmosphere. And, well, they felt too many people from different backgrounds would throw that off. Different backgrounds. I almost laughed. A small sound escaped my chest. Not funny laughter. The kind that slips out when your heart cracks but doesn't shatter yet. They thought it was better if only the people who truly fit the aesthetic were there. Worthy. That word echoed through my kitchen. I thought of the nights I worked double shifts at the university library, so Evan could attend schools I never dreamed of. I thought of winters spent in the same old coat, so he could have new shoes. I thought of holding him for 12 hours straight the night his father died, whispering promises I never broke. I had been worthy enough to build his life, just not worthy enough to watch him begin it. I understand, I said. No tears yet. The pain was deeper than that. Cold. Numbing. Settling into my bones. Before I could even process it, he added, Mom, there's something else. And there it was. The pause. The inhale. The familiar shift. The wedding went a little over budget. The Harringtons had some temporary issues with their accounts. Nothing serious. Just timing. And I told Brielle not to worry, because, well, you always have my back. My heart sank so fast it felt like falling downstairs. The total is $65,000, he said gently. Too gently. I emailed you the invoice. You can wire it from your retirement account, right? It's urgent. The venue manager is being difficult. $65,000. Almost everything I had left. I stared at the wall while he waited for my answer. My hands clenched so tightly they hurt. I wasn't invited to the wedding, but I was invited to pay for it. If this story already feels close to home, take a breath with me. You're not imagining the weight of it. Mom, Evan asked. You there? I'm here, I said. I took a sip of the cold coffee and almost gagged. Send me the details. Thank you, he said instantly. Relief. I knew I could count on you. We're heading to the airport. Maldives. We'll talk later. Love you.
Click.
The line went dead. Love you. The words sat on the counter, like a receipt. I stayed there long after the call ended, staring at the mist as the light finally broke through the clouds. It didn't feel like morning. It felt like something ending. And standing there, alone in that quiet kitchen, I had no idea that this phone call wasn't just about money. It was about to force me to decide who I was willing to lose, my son or myself. And that decision? It would change everything. But what happened next wasn't anger. It wasn't screaming. It was something far more dangerous. Because when I opened that email, I realized something that made my hands stop shaking completely. And that's when the silence became power. Part 2 is where everything turns. I didn't open the email right away. I just sat there, my phone resting on the table like it might explode if I touched it. The house creaked softly, the kind of old, tired sound that feels like a sigh. Outside, Seattle kept moving. Cars passed. People lived their lives. Somewhere, my son was boarding a plane to a honeymoon I wasn't good enough to attend, but apparently good enough to fund. I finally opened the laptop. There it was. A glossy invoice from a luxury event company in Bellevue. The logo alone looked expensive. Clean lines. Elegant font. Everything about it whispered status. And at the bottom, like it was nothing more than a grocery total. $65,000. I laughed. Not a cute laugh. Not a joyful one. A short, broken sound that startled even me. $65,000 for flowers that would die in a day. For champagne no one would remember the taste of. For an intimate wedding that somehow still needed my entire future to survive. I scrolled. $10,000 for floral arrangements. $15,000 for a plated dinner. $12,000 for an open bar. My eyes blurred, not from tears, yet, but from disbelief. These weren't just numbers. These were years. These were nights shelving books until my hands ached. These were knees that already warned me they wouldn't last forever. And he wanted it all. For a party I wasn't invited to. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, a sound escaping my throat that was half a sob, half disbelief. I remembered a rainy Tuesday 20 years ago. Evan was 12. He wanted a charcoal suit for a school gala. $300. I didn't have it. Not even close. So I worked extra hours. Every night. For a month. My back screamed. My hands cracked. But when he walked out the door in that suit, chest puffed up, eyes shining, he hugged me and said I was the best mom in the world. Where did that boy go? If you're listening right now, and you've ever given everything to someone who treats it like an obligation, stay with me. This part matters. The email pinged again. A follow-up. Mom, did you see it? The venue is pushing hard.
Please don't delay.
We're about to take off. My stomach twisted. I checked my bank account. $68,214. If I paid that invoice, I'd have barely $3,000 left. For emergencies. For medical bills. For the day my body finally said, enough. He wasn't asking for help. He was asking for my survival. I stood up and walked to my closet. The navy blue dress was still there, wrapped in plastic. I ran my fingers over the fabric.
Soft.
Careful. Chosen with love. I had imagined sitting in the front row, watching my son smile, maybe glance my way, maybe feel proud. I let out a shaky breath and dropped the dress onto the floor. It landed in a quiet heap. That's when it hit me. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't family. I wasn't even an afterthought. I was a resource. A backup plan. A wire transfer. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. I stared at Evan's name. For a moment I almost answered. Almost apologized for hesitating. Almost did what I had always done. Made it work somehow. Instead, I let it ring. My hands were shaking again. But something else was there now. Something colder. Sharper. I realized I wasn't crying because I was heartbroken. I was crying because I was finally seeing the truth. And once you see it, oh, you can't unsee it. Quick pause if this story is hitting somewhere deep. Tap like. It tells me you're still here with me. And trust me, what happens next is where everything cracks open. The call stopped. A text followed. Please hurry. You're making this stressful. I laughed again. A wet, ugly laugh. I'm making it stressful. I walked back into the kitchen and poured the cold coffee down the sink. Watched it disappear.
Gone. Just like that.
I made myself a fresh cup of tea instead, hands steadier now. I wasn't angry. I was done. Because for the first time in decades, I asked myself a question I had never allowed before. What happens if I say no? And the answer terrified me. But it also felt freeing. I sat back down at the table, the invoice glowing on the screen, ticking like a clock. Somewhere over the Pacific, my son was sipping champagne. And I was about to make a choice that would change how he saw me forever. I didn't know it yet, but that invoice wasn't just a bill.
It was a test.
And in part 3, someone unexpected would show up. Someone who would help me uncover a truth even my son didn't know. And once that truth surfaced, there was no going back. The house was too quiet after that. Not the peaceful kind. The kind where your own thoughts get loud enough to hurt. I sat at the dining table long after the tea went cold, the invoice still open on my laptop like it was waiting for my signature or my surrender. Then the phone rang again. Not Evan. A landline call.
Rare.
Almost forgotten. I hesitated, then answered. Lena, a familiar voice said. I closed my eyes. Caleb. I breathed out, half a laugh slipping through my throat. Caleb Rowe, retired forensic accountant. He'd spent decades coming into the university library every Tuesday afternoon, always polite, always quiet, always carrying more numbers in his head than most people carry memories. Over the years, we'd shared small conversations. Safe ones.
Books.
Weather. The comfort of order. You sounded shaken when you left that message, he said gently. Do you want me to come by? I don't know what possessed me to say yes. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe instinct. Maybe the librarian in me knew something was out of place and needed to be cataloged. An hour later, his old sedan pulled into the driveway. He stepped inside, glanced at my face, and immediately stopped smiling. Oh, he said softly. This is one of those stories. We sat at the table where I once helped Evan with his homework. I slid the invoice across to him without a word. Caleb adjusted his glasses. 60 seconds passed. Then he exhaled slowly. Lena, this isn't a snag. I blinked. What do you mean? He turned his laptop toward me, fingers moving with a confidence that comes from decades of truth-telling. Records opened. Public filings. Legal notices. The Harringtons, he said carefully, aren't wealthy. My chest tightened. They're insolvent, he continued.
Deeply.
This wedding wasn't over budget. It was unfunded. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. But Evan said their accounts were frozen for an audit. Caleb let out a humorless chuckle. That's not an audit. That's a freeze order. Bankruptcy court.
Offshore.
The kind that doesn't go away. He scrolled again. Tax liens. Foreclosures. Lawsuits from caterers in 3 different states. I felt something tear loose inside me. They don't need a loan, he said quietly. They need a donor. I laughed. A sharp sound. Almost hysterical. So, they married my son for love, then? Caleb didn't answer right away. They saw him as a leverage, he said finally. Ambitious.
Eager.
And connected to a woman with a paid-off house and a retirement account.
Oh.
Oh no. The air felt thick. I suddenly remembered every look, every dismissive smile. Every time Brielle's mother glanced around my house like she was mentally pricing it. They weren't judging me. They were assessing me. If you're listening and your stomach just dropped too, yeah. Mine did too. Caleb closed the laptop. If you send that money, he said gently, you will never see it again. And it won't stop there. Next will be a house. Then a line of credit. Then silence. Silence. That word again. I stood up, pacing, hands in my hair, a laugh bubbling up that quickly turned into something broken. My son called me selfish. He said I was making this difficult. Caleb's jaw tightened. "You're not difficult," he said. "You're being hunted." That did it. The tears came fast then. Ugly.
Loud.
I covered my face, shoulders shaking, a sound escaping me that felt like years of restraint collapsing all at once. Caleb didn't interrupt.
He just sat there.
Steady, like libraries always are. When I finally looked up, my eyes burned. "They're coming here this afternoon," I whispered. "They said they want to help manage my assets." Caleb's eyes sharpened. "They want your house." The words landed heavy. "They'll be charming," he continued.
Calm.
Concerned. Desperate people are very good at pretending they're doing you a favor. I walked to the window and stared at the Space Needle in the distance. Solid. Unapologetic. For the first time in days, my hands weren't shaking. "What do I do?" I asked. Caleb stood and placed a folder on the table. "We prepare," he said. "You don't give them money. You give them the truth." We spent hours organizing documents. Not chaos, order.
Clean. Precise.
The way I'd spent my entire career doing it for others. Somewhere between the tax liens and the lawsuit filings, something inside me shifted. I wasn't weak. I wasn't naive. I had been generous. And generosity, when abused, doesn't become stupidity. It becomes strength with boundaries. Caleb glanced at the navy blue dress lying folded nearby. "You should wear that," he said suddenly. I laughed through my tears. "To be robbed?" "No," he said. "To be seen." I stared at the dress. And for the first time, I didn't see a wedding. I saw armor. Quick pause. If you've ever been mistaken for soft when you were actually strong, stay with me. The next part is where the masks come off. Because in part 4 they arrived. Not asking. Not apologizing. But expecting. And this time, I was ready. They thought they were coming to manage me. They didn't know they were walking into an archive. And once the records were opened, there was no place left to hide. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, tires crunched against the gravel in my driveway. Right on time. I stood in the living room, smoothing the navy fabric over my hips, the pearls cool against my collarbone. My reflection in the window startled me for a second. I didn't look like a woman waiting to be managed. I looked composed.
Still.
Dangerous in a quiet way. The doorbell rang.
Once.
Confident. Assured. I opened the door before they could ring again. Brielle's mother stood there first, immaculate as always. Cream-colored coat. Perfect hair. A smile stretched so tight it could have snapped. Her husband lingered just behind her, eyes already scanning the house, measuring the walls like they were counting square footage. "Lena," she said brightly. "You look lovely." I smiled back.
"Come in," I said.
They stepped inside like they owned the place. Like they always had. We sat at the dining table. My table. The same one where Evan once spilled juice and cried because he thought he'd ruined everything. I wondered when he learned to stop caring. "We're very concerned about you," Brielle's mother began, folding her hands. This whole wedding situation must have been overwhelming. I tilted my head. Overwhelming. "Yes," she said smoothly. "At your stage in life, finances can be confusing."
Ah.
There it was. Her husband leaned forward. "We have advisors in Bellevue who specialize in transitions like this. Downsizing. Liquidating assets. Making sure funds are put to good use for family." I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. Soft at first. Then louder. A little hysterical. The kind of laugh that makes people shift in their seats. "Oh," I said, wiping my eyes. "You're serious." They exchanged a glance. I reached for the folder Caleb and I had prepared and placed it gently on the table. "I've been organizing," I said calmly. "Old habit." I opened it. Tax liens slid across polished wood. Foreclosure notices followed. A lawsuit from an Oregon catering company. The room changed temperature instantly. Brielle's mother's smile faltered. Her husband stiffened. "What is this?" he snapped. "Public records," I replied. "You'd be amazed what stays on file." Silence. "You told my son your accounts were frozen for an audit," I continued. You neglected to mention the bankruptcy court, or the unpaid taxes, or the fact that the Lake Washington estate doesn't belong to you. Her eyes darted. Just for a second. That's all I needed. You used my son, I said quietly. And you tried to use me. Her husband slammed his palm on the table. You don't understand how things work. I leaned forward, voice steady. I spent 40 years managing information. I understand exactly how this works. Brielle's mother's voice trembled. We were going to pay you back. With what? I asked gently. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That was the moment. The one where the illusion shattered. Where the aesthetic collapsed under the weight of truth. You're not here to help me, I said. You're here because you're desperate. They stood abruptly. You're making a mistake, the husband hissed. Your son will never forgive you. I smiled then. A real one.
Sad. Free.
He already made his choice, I said. Now I've made mine. They left without another word. The door closed behind them with a soft, final click. I exhaled. Then my phone rang. Evan. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. What did you do? He shouted the second I picked up. They're furious. They said you humiliated them. I almost laughed. Almost cried. I told the truth, I said. You ruined everything, he yelled. They're threatening legal action. Brielle is crying. This is all your fault. I felt something settle inside me.
Cold. Solid.
I wasn't at your wedding, I said quietly. But you wanted me to pay for it. That tells me everything. There was silence on the other end. You chose people who saw me as a wallet, I continued. I raised you to know better. You're being dramatic, he snapped weakly. No, I said. I'm being finished. My voice didn't shake. I'm not paying the bill. Not today. Not ever. You're dead to me, he whispered. A tear slipped down my cheek. Not from pain.
From release.
I lost you long before today, I said softly. I just stopped pretending otherwise. I hung up. The house went quiet again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was clean. If you're still here with me, breathe. That moment when you finally stop begging to be loved, that's where power begins. But this wasn't the end, because in part 5, something happened I never expected. He came back, and I had to decide whether boundaries were stronger than blood. I thought the story ended with a slammed door and a broken phone call. I was wrong, because a week later, there was a knock at my door. And this time it wasn't them. The knock was soft. Not the confident, entitled knock I'd come to dread. This one hesitated, like the hand wasn't sure it deserved to be there. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Evan stood on my porch, rain clinging to his jacket, eyes hollow, shoulders slumped like the weight of the world had finally found him. He looked smaller somehow, older, like the boy in the charcoal suit had finally run out of mirrors to stand in front of. Mom, he said. Just that. No anger. No demands. No urgency. I didn't move aside. I didn't invite him in. We stood there, the rain filling the silence between us. I messed up, he said finally. His voice cracked, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt my chest ache the way it used to when he scraped his knees. They're being investigated. The bills, the wedding planner. Brielle left. She said she couldn't live like this. I nodded slowly. I know. He looked up, eyes red. I didn't understand. I thought if I could just belong to that world, everything would make sense. I thought you'd understand. A sad smile touched my lips. I did understand, I said softly. That's why I said no. He swallowed hard. I don't have anywhere to go. There it was. The question without words. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain tapped against the porch railings, patient, honest. I thought about the nights I carried him when he was sick. The years I bent myself into shapes I never fit into just to make his life smoother. And I thought about the peace I had finally found. Evan, I said gently, loving you doesn't mean losing myself. His shoulders trembled. A sound escaped him, something between a laugh and a sob. I don't know how to do this alone. I didn't either, I replied. I learned. I stepped back, but not to let him in. I handed him a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" he asked. "A list of shelters, job resources, and a note from an old friend who's hiring. It's work, real work." He stared at it like it might burn. "You're not letting me stay?" he whispered. I shook my head slowly. Tears burned my eyes, but my voice stayed steady. "This house isn't a safety net anymore," I said. "It's a home, and homes need boundaries to survive." He nodded, wiping his face with his sleeve, a small, broken laugh slipping out. "You always did say books need spines." I smiled through the tears. "Yes," I said. "They do." He stepped back into the rain, turning once more. "I'm sorry," he said. This time, it sounded real. "I know," I replied. And then he was gone. I closed the door. I didn't collapse. I didn't scream. I didn't fall apart. I stood there, breathing, feeling the quiet settle, not like emptiness, but like space.
Space to live. Space to heal.
Space to finally hear myself think. Days turned into weeks. I donated the navy dress, took long walks, sat in libraries just to read, not organize. I laughed at things again, small things. A crooked shelf, a silly line in a book. I cried too, sometimes quietly, but the tears didn't drown me anymore. I was no longer paying for love. I was choosing myself. And right here, before this story ends, I want to pause with you for a moment. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because if you're listening to this and your chest feels tight, if you've ever been made to feel like love meant sacrifice without limits, please hear me. Boundaries are not cruelty. Saying no is not abandonment. And choosing yourself is not selfish. It's survival. I am Lena Harper. I was a librarian. I was a mother. And now, I am finally the author of my own life. The silence in my house isn't lonely anymore. It sounds like freedom.